Got a couple chapters. We had a couple chapters this week. The first two chapters of book 2 of Fellowship. And if you guys didn't notice, that second chapter is a pretty long chapter. So that's it's some pretty heavy reading for what it is anyway.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of differences between this section and the film, for sure. I definitely notice quite a bit.
Hold on. Do we want to start talking about chapter 2 already?
No, I mean the whole section. There's a lot of differences. Yeah, not jumping into chapter 2.
I mean, when you're talking about the first chapter, which is essentially convalescing Frodo, what are you pointing to in specific when you say that?
One thing that I thought was kind of interesting right away was when Gandalf, or when Frodo wakes up, Gandalf's sitting there blowing smoke rings, smoking the hashish.
Now, you've said this a couple times that you liken this to not really being tobacco, but that it's actually...
Oh, it's weed.
Okay. Now, how do you know that?
It's referred to as weed a couple times.
Yep.
So, in the book, the finest weed in the South.
And I mean,
they call it the finest.
Was a friend of Mary Jane.
They literally say it's the finest weed in the South Farley.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, Tolkien's name is really close to Token,
I don't necessarily buy into this whole idea that it's not just really good tobacco. I know you've referenced it a few times, but I just don't.
It has been agreed upon by the literary universe that it is weed, and that's why Saruman makes that comment. Your love of the halfling's leaf has weakened your mind. So yeah, it's definitely weed. Why do you think Pippin and Merry are so like? Because they smoke it all the time.
They're hobbits, and hobbits are silly little folk.
So yeah, it's weed. Well, kind of first impressions of chapter 1, the beginning. Frodo's waking up after what's been a few days. I've got plenty of notes here, but just kind of opening up the floor here before we get going. Anything that kind of stuck out to you guys from chapter 1, and I'll fill in as we go through.
I think one of the things that I thought was, and maybe again I just didn't read into it enough, but I felt like in the film they made a much bigger deal about the lifelong effects of Frodo's wound. But in the book, they're just kind of like, well, yeah, he's got a little something. His hand looks a little transparent, but other than that, he's okay. And they made it seem much more dire in the movie, like he's going to carry that wound for the rest of his life, and it's all this other type of jazz.
Yeah, that's totally true.
Glad I brought up that topic of discussion. Nobody want
to. Yeah, I think it's. I really like this section of the book. Just a few things that I took note of. Gandalf already knows about the barrow. He said that. Now, this is interesting. He said, Frodo, you were talking in your sleep, but also I read your memory.
Yeah.
I never picked up on that, so I guess that's some power that Gandalf had that we don't really ever get any glimpse of in the films, but he can apparently read people's memories.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I don't know about cool, but it's definitely different.
It's cooler than like, oh, I was reading your palm, or something lame like that. He's not like a
Well, the one thing is if it seems almost like a Deus Ex Machina kind of thing, because it's like, well, if he can read people's memories, how come he wasn't able to pull the true story from Bilbo without Bilbo knowing it? Why did he have to wait until Bilbo actually told him the true account of things before he knew exactly what happened? He could.
I mean, maybe he never creeped on Bilbo while he was sleeping. maybe maybe the fact that Frodo was out for like days, it's just like maybe he was just open to, but I don't know. It's like the fact that he was talking and asleep, like maybe there was some connection with like how open Frodo was or something.
And I think Gandalf
I
didn't have
assume-
any reason to do that to Bilbo because he believed him, believed his account.
I seem to remember that, there's more to this hobbit than it seems when he became the thief, finding a ring of invisibility under suspicious circumstances, especially when he just kind of popped up out of nowhere. I would think that unless the leaf was causing him not to be paranoid enough, but it seems like, especially as he started hearing rumblings about Mordor and things like that, that he would have been a lot more interested and would have been able to put two and two together, even if he is just an old stoner, as you purport him to be.
I didn't say that. He's not just an old stoner.
That he's dazed and confused.
I like that, Gandalf's quote, he said, there are many powers in the world, some more powerful than I. Against some I have not been measured, but my time is coming. So it's like he has an idea. I mean, it's like he's already having premonitions of what's coming up ahead somehow.
Right.
He knows that there's, tough stuff ahead, and he knows that Mordor is preparing for war. So
maybe he's reading the minds of birds that he's met that have flown over Mordor.
Yeah, well, I mean, doesn't he mention in the chapter giving his account that because he's talking about like Radagast and how he was kind of tricked by Saruman into going and stuff, but then Radagast, because of his earnestness, it's like he goes and he does exactly what Gandalf had told him to do.
Yeah.
And that the eagles and whatever, like, and the creatures that Radagast communicates with, it's like they had like immediately gone and done what he had asked, and they had seen the armies being built and all that. So it's like I don't know, it's like he definitely already knew that stuff was, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's more to it, but I mean,
it's interesting because Elrond is said to have the power of foresight. So he's got this like prophetic thing going on that's like one of his abilities. And yet it seems like Gandalf does as well to some end. But it's interesting because like when you read different accounts of different characters throughout the book, it's like different characters pick up on different pieces. Like Galadriel will see certain things, and Elrond will see certain things, and Gandalf will see. But it's like nobody gets the complete picture. Everybody gets little bits and pieces of it, as far as their premonition, whatever you want to call it. But I just find that interesting that it's like, the Valar or whoever's giving them these visions, they're not giving the whole, scene to one individual in Middle Earth.
Right.
Forcing them to have to work in unison to be able to kind of figure out what's going on.
Yeah. I would agree with that. It's pretty strange.
Yeah.
Annoying, I'm sure.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit because some of this stuff is from the second chapter rather than the first.
Well, I mean, in comparison, the first chapter was not very long.
No, and there's not a lot of really heavy stuff in the first chapter. It's definitely
differ from the movie as far as its end game. It's like still the same information is essentially conveyed.
Yeah. Jordan, anything that you as far as from Frodo waking up, his conversation with Gandalf there at the bedside?
Light conversation back and forth, and
nothing's
really brought up that needed to be answered or that would leave questions in a reader for that.
Gandalf also, it seems like he knows that Frodo's journey is not over. He pretty much knows that Frodo's going to be the one to move things forward from
It
here.
seems like they all know he has to do it, but they're waiting on him to make the choice himself.
Yeah.
Quiet at the meeting until he says something. They all know that's like they're waiting on him.
Yeah, I know. Elrond already has this big thing prepared. He's like, well, I wasn't going to make you, but.
Yeah. You know, and there's another comment that, you know, they talked about how those who have been to Valinor have great power. So it talks like that kind of gives a little bit of credence to why the Noldor elves that went over in the first age, like Galadriel and Elrond's, you know, ancestors, like why they're so powerful with magic, because they saw the two trees before all that kind of went down in the first age. And you're really like what Frodo saw when he saw Glorfindel all lit up, you know, all brilliant, was really that form, if you will. You know, kind of, he has like, it's very similar to like when Galadriel in the film, she has that moment where she's talking to the ring and she gets all big and glowy and kind of scary. That's kind of similar to that. It's I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, you know, I think that's kind of the way that Frodo would have pictured Glorfindel when he showed up to you know, save him.
Right.
They made a comment, you know, even Glorfindel and Aragorn couldn't withstand all the 9 at once. So that kind of gives you an idea of how, you know, how powerful they would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I thought it was cool that the wraiths who weren't swept away, you know, it said that he brandished fire and attacked the wraiths who weren't swept away. So Glorfindel actually went after the ones who, you know, were still around.
Yeah.
I also really liked, you know, it's like Frodo was asking how the river, you know, did that. And he's like, well, Elrond, you know, commanded it to, but I added the horses, you know. It has a pretty cool effect, right? You know, like,
Yeah. I was trying to think of like in a movie, you know, it's kind of like just like, well, yeah, Elrond, you know, that's like their electric fence essentially, you know, but
yeah.
I was the one that thought
I did the horses.
I was one. Did you notice how some of them look like white horses? You know, this guy. And it's like, yeah, did you notice those white horses, man? My idea, man. I like it a little bit too much. You guys are all right.
Oh no!
I'm gonna like from here on out. I'm gonna be thinking of Gandalf as like Tommy Strong or something.
Oh God, I ruined
like, hey man, we gotta go to the mountain, man.
Blow, Satchmo, blow.
Yeah, man. Just chill, man.
You know, I liked when Gandalf scolded Pippin for calling Frodo the Lord of the Ring.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was just like.
He flipped on him instantly.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's like I'm trying to think of like an actual modern day equivalent, you know,
Yeah.
of what that would be. But it was just like, yeah, oh, make way for the Lord of the Rings. He's like, you stupid little.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody know why too? Why? And this is like really not that big of a deal. But it's like them keeping the fact that Bilbo's there is a lot cuter in the book. It's like they're trying to be, you know, they're handling him or they're trying to be cute about it. It's like, don't tell Frodo Bilbo's here. It's going to be such a great surprise. I was like, why are they not even, when he's just like, oh, I really would like to see Bilbo just one last time.
That would be a good time to say something, right?
Yeah. Oh, you'll get to see him tomorrow. Until now and then, sleep and dream and be cool, dude. But instead, it's just like, who's that guy in the cloak over there? And why wasn't he at my party?
With bread and water. That's all he.
Yeah, I was like, man, that's bad. I was just like, he's not only older, but they kind of got him and they're saying, oh, well, we sing a couple of his songs every once in a while, throw him a couple crusts of bread and some, you know, swamp water, and he's okay.
I saw the book doesn't seem to even hint at like they acknowledge that Bilbo even says he's like, I'm old, but they don't have any lines saying like that he has aged. Like the movie, by the time you got to Rivendell, he already had all white hair, had all.
Well, I don't know. I feel like the way they, I mean, again, the way they treat him, because I mean, it's like it was like during the council, and when it's like senile Bilbo's like volunteering to, like, oh no, it's all right, Bilbo.
Yeah.
I appreciate the thought, buddy.
Yeah. And it's just like, oh, you don't need to go back to the Shire. You just stay here. The road, it's rough out there, Bilbo.
Yeah, the writers are after you, man.
Yeah. Just, hang out. Chill.
Yeah, they all kind of gave him that smile, like we know you would, and we respect that you would. Except Boromir, he has no idea like who this guy is.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and he's the only one who's not looking at him with respect.
Yeah. He was kind of confused there, but they're like, Bilbo, you don't need to bow. You've done enough. You're good.
Yeah.
It's like you need to relax and finish your story, and your part's done. Like it was. I don't know. I didn't see them as like laughing at the idea. It was just like that kind smile, like we know you would. We know you would take it if we let you.
Yeah, but I mean that, and the way that they talk after his song lets you kind of know a little bit about how the elves tolerate mortals. They're just like, sing your song again. He's just like, no, it's too long. And it's just like, well, we can't pick out the difference between, what Strider and you composed in just one sitting. He's just like, well, if you can't tell the difference between a hobbit, and they're just like, I'm sure two sheep think that they're really just like jerks.
They definitely have a little bit of an elitist attitude for sure.
A little.
Now, I thought the descriptions of Gandalf, Glorfindel, and Elrond were all really, really, really good whenever he's like noticing kind of the differences between them.
Arwen.
And Arwen, because she's a direct descendant of Luthien, they talk about how she's, the most beautiful being to be in Middle-earth since her. And I thought it was cool too. I also think it's awesome that she lived in, she lived in Lorien with Galadriel for quite a long time. And only just recently came back to Rivendell. Galadriel's her Gma and everything. So,
yeah.
So
quick straw poll: hotter elf, Evangeline Lilly or Liv Tyler?
Liv Tyler.
Liv
Tyler.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both good, but
Liv Tyler. No, there's no question there.
Yeah, there is.
And the other problem is Evangeline Lilly's character doesn't even exist. It's not even a real character. They made it up for the movie.
I'm not asking you that. I said, who makes the prettier elf? Did I say any?
Liv Tyler.
Yeah, well.
All right, all in favor of Liv Tyler.
Yeah, Jordan's abstaining.
Okay, whatever.
The thing about it is I really wasn't talking about the description of her beauty anyway in the book. I just like the way that they talked about how their eyes have known too many, and they had like a string for each one of them that was very metaphorical about describing what they were like. It's like he's not old, but he's not young.
Yeah.
No, and had his moment of realizing that Gandalf is not just like the fireworks guy.
Yeah.
Like at dinner when he saw him sitting, he goes, I finally he realized that he's looked at a certain way and held in high regard for his power or whatnot.
Absolutely. Right. I thought the conversation with Glowin was really cool, and it's kind of sad that got axed from the film.
Yeah.
Because it really does connect the franchises in a cool way.
Yeah.
Because obviously Glowin was, a big part of what happened in The Hobbit, but just some things that he made note of that, again, it's cool that Tolkien, even these years later, thought hey, let's connect some dots with this book. Like Beorn's son is now guarding the North Passes. So, we know that Beorn didn't end up being the last changeling. There's been more, which is cool. That Dane is still king and he's 250 years old. It's crazy. You know, so Dane, the one riding the war pig with the big hammer and Battle of Five Armies is still king under the mountain. And then he talked about how Bomber is so fat now. They can't like even do anything.
Takes 6 young dwarves to pick him up.
That was all really good and lighthearted, and I loved that connection. I thought
kind of gave their endings.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice that Tolkien thought, you know, I'll go ahead and give a little bit of information about these characters that you've already connected with before, even though they're not important to this story necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Bilbo's writing the song with Aragorn, thought that was cool. And then something else that they didn't talk about in the films, but that Bilbo actually made it all the way to Dale and back. And I forgot about that.
I thought that was pretty cool too.
Yeah. So it's like he did actually make the full journey and get to the mountain. You know, because he kept talking about how he wanted to see mountains again. He did get there.
Well, and that kind of goes back into what I was saying too, is that Glowin specifically mentions in his conversation with Frodo about it'd be great if you could see all the different fountains and pools and subterranean halls that we've built, that you'd know that we wouldn't be idle. And I think he was even just like, I bet Bilbo would have loved to have seen that too. And he's just like, maybe. Why is everybody being so coy about this? You know? Why don't you ask him? You know, what?
This is just kind of like a little side track thing here, but you know, he's there to talk about the fact that Balin went to Moria. Now, if you don't remember Balin's character from the Hobbit films, he was the older dwarf with honestly the most likable one out of the group. He was like the advisor to Thorin and had the long gray beard.
Yeah.
And was the nicest one in the group for sure. So that makes it kind of more sad to know that, you know, the kind of end that he met in Moria. That sucks because he was a cool character.
An impetuous end that you wouldn't have expected from him either.
No, but, you know, it makes such a huge difference because in the film, we don't hear anything about Moria until they're already at the pass of Caradhras, and now they're, you know, deciding where they want to go. And it's like, well, here they already know what's happened in Moria pretty much. So it changes the dynamic of them deciding to go through Moria because they already know that they're going to be met with a lot of problems there.
Yeah, like Rowan has the line that they woke something.
Yep.
That they gave that line to Gandalf in the movie.
Yeah.
It was Balin and who else? Ori and
Ori and
there's 3 of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was another one of the original group that went back. And there were a lot of other dwarves too. I mean, they took like a company of dwarves there to try to take Moria back. I mean, it was a battle.
Yeah,
for sure. And I mean, it looked like they had won, but again, it's interesting because this kind of repeating issue with the dwarves, it traces all the way back to their beginning, where, you know, there's this like kind of greedy nature to them. And so I started kind of studying back through like why the dwarves are the way they are. And also, like we had been talking about, like why they don't really connect with the other free people of Middle Earth in a really deep way. And I think a lot of that has to do with how they were made. So I just kind of like went back and read through that section of the Silmarillion real quick. And so they were created, they weren't actually even supposed to exist. So in the first age you had, you know, the Iluvatar, he makes the Valar, and I mean, there's like a whole pantheon of gods within, you know, the Silmarillion, but they're really only a handful that are actually really matter in the story. You know, Morgoth obviously being one of them, and him being kind of the big baddie of the group. And then you have Manwë, who's Morgoth's brother and the second most powerful. Then you have one called named Auli, and he was the smith.
He goes great on sandwiches too.
Aioli, man. Aioli. Fancy word for mayonnaise. But he was a smith and really considered to be kind of the opposite of Morgoth. So Morgoth also wanted to be a creator. He's jealous of the Iluvatar, wanted to kind of shape Middle-earth in his own image, didn't like that he had to fall in line with God all the time, which is obviously kind of a biblical allegory. So him and then the other Maiar that followed him got sent down to Middle-earth. The Maiar became Balrogs, and they're his servants. But Aioli, being the smith, he also liked to create things, but he wanted to do things within the Iluvatar's order. So he was kind of a yin to Morgoth's yang, if you will. And so anyway, but also incredibly impatient and really just described as like a big godlike dwarf. I mean, you know, that's basically what he is. And so he gets impatient because he's waiting for the elves to wake up in Middle-earth, and he's like, I'll just make my own thing. And so he crafts out of the ground the dwarves. But because he was just a Valar, he didn't have the ability to give them a soul. So it's like they were like puppet-like creatures, and they could only move or do anything whenever he bent his will on them. Otherwise, they were just kind of laying there lifeless with no soul. Well, the Iluvatar finds out, gets super pissed, and he goes and repents for what he did because he realized, wow, I really messed this up. And it's kind of like an Abraham and Isaac moment where the Iluvatar tells him he has to go and kill them. And so he fashions this giant hammer, and there's a really cool illustration you can find of this, where all the dwarves are kind of like shying away from him, and he's this giant with this massive hammer getting ready to kill them all. And right before he does it, the Iluvatar stops him and says, you know what, because of your repentance, I'm going to save them, and I'll graft them in. And so he gave them souls, but he says, I'm going to put them to sleep until after the elves have woke up, because they're the rightful first beings. I made them. So you kind of have that, like that same mentality, that stepchild, we weren't really wanted, I'm, you know, angry at the world, this is why we hate the elves because they were chosen over us, kind of mentality that's woven all through the generations of Middle-earth, because they feel like they kind of got the short end of the stick when they were really actually did come first. They were actually around before men and elves. So just some interesting perspective on kind of where the dwarves came from, and I thought you guys might find that interesting.
Cool.
That Valar, Aioli, his Maiar, his, you know, pupils, if you will, were actually Sauron and Saruman before they came to Middle-earth. So, you know, you could say they're kind of like old friends from work. So, you know, it makes me question why the Valar would have made Saruman be the head of the order, knowing that he was buddy-buddy with Sauron whenever, you know, whenever he was in Valinor. That didn't make a lot of sense to me. That really kind of tweaked with me a little bit. But it also makes sense why Sauron was so good at crafting the rings. It's, you know, he learned from the greatest craftsmith. And then also we saw here where in the reading where Saruman, what's one thing they noticed, that he was wearing a ring. He called himself Saruman Ringmaker.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of, you know, thing getting passed down from their time in Valinor. Now they're Middle-earth, and they obviously have some knowledge about that. So did you guys feel like so like Bilbo, when he goes into his little like demon state and tries to snatch the ring, do you feel like that mirrored the film well in the book? I don't know. Did you guys notice any differences there?
I mean, they said that they didn't say demon state. Didn't they just say a shadow passed over him? Is that?
Just saw him differently for a second. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they played it for the jump scare in the film.
Yeah.
And, I think that in the same way that Frodo's kind of starting to see things beneath people's skin, not believing his eyes necessarily, it's like he almost saw a version of Gollum hiding in there. Because I think I remember in the text it actually saying that, he saw something, wrinkled and mean or something like that. I forget exactly how it was worded, but it made it sound like there was something living inside of him that he was just seeing. So yeah, I think they definitely played that as well as they could in the movie, but I didn't really see it that way. And I also thought it was interesting the way that they said everything just sort of stopped. The music stopped and everybody just kind of stopped and stared when that happened.
And it happened in public. It didn't happen in like a side chamber. It happened right in front of everybody.
Right. And the thing that I didn't really get was then like right after that, he was just like, well, now I understand why I shouldn't have the ring. Let's talk about something else. And I was just like, okay, we're not going to address that, Bilbo.
I feel like that was more on Frodo's end than Bilbo.
Yeah, that's kind of how I thought. Like, I mean, because it's like it obviously affected Bilbo, but it's like it also seemed like the darkness. It was like also Frodo's perception of what was happening.
Frodo's reaction
because he starts viewing him. He doesn't see him as Bilbo, and it's almost like, I don't know. It's like it kind of like reminds you of the story of before Smeagol killed was it Deagle or I don't know the his cousin or whatever. How it was like, I don't know, there was just this thing that kind of like came over him, and and it's just like it obviously is just like it like negatively affected both of them.
Yeah.
But it's like how do you show that in the movie? But it's like, well, by, I don't know, having them do that thing with Bilbo, it's like, I don't know, it's like, I don't know, it kind of just like simplifies the whole thing, but it was
right.
Definitely.
I just looked it up. It says a shadow seemed to have fallen between them, and through it he found himself eyeing a little wrinkled creature with a hungry face and bony, groping hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, it almost like it like dehumanizes them.
Yeah. It's like Bilbo just happened to look at him and notice that Frodo was looking at him funny, and he realized what was going on. So he's like, oh, well, fine. I don't need to see it. We're good.
I thought it was really ballsy, though, to do like a whole song about Elrond's dead mom and dad in Rivendell. I don't know if that was like a great move. Yeah, I guess Elrond had at this point over a millennia to get over it, so he's probably cool. But
plus, Bilbo's old, and old people can get away with doing whatever.
Well, okay, he's old for a hobbit, but again, we're comparing to other people sitting in the room. Bilbo's quite young.
Yeah, but I'm still saying that old people in general, it's just like their filter.
Yeah.
It's like, hell, if I want to sing about your mom and dad, I'm going to sing about your mom and dad. You better like it.
Didn't somebody actually make a comment? It was Aragorn that made a comment about it. He's like, oh, you're going to sing a song about his dead mom and dad, And just so anybody doesn't know, Rivendell was half elven. He was probably the greatest sailor in the history of Middle Earth. And then Elwing would have been like the grandchild or great grandchild of Beren and Luthien. So she was also half elven, and that's why their children, I always forget the two sons' names, but Arwen and the other two, that's why they're able to choose, who if they want to be human or elf kind, they get that choice. And Elwing, she had a really sad death because basically she like sacrificed herself to stop the infighting between the elves. She threw herself in the ocean with the Cymril so that basically they would, like, the Noldor and the Sindar elves would stop fighting. She just sacrificed herself. It was kind of sad. Actually, I think Elrond's wife was captured and tortured and killed by orcs or something. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's why the brothers were off on the frontier trying to keep the North safe, because they remembered what happened to their mother.
Yeah. I think she may have been captured by Sauron. It was like something really bad. I mean, it was a really bad situation. I know that.
She just left Middle Earth.
What'd you say?
His wife.
Okay, so she didn't die?
No, Elrond recovered her physically, but it says she never recovered mind or spirit and no longer wished to stay, so she left for the Grey Havens.
All right. So, chapter 2, obviously, Glowin says that Balin's been in Moria for about 30 years. So he's been there quite a long time.
Left for Moria.
Yeah.
Doesn't really say how long ago the communication stopped, does it?
No. Did you guys like the part where the messenger from the great Lord Sauron came to treat with Dane? I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, using his old tricks.
Yeah.
I can make you a ring. Rings are nice. People like rings.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And was kind of also hoping to find their old ring when he went to Moria.
Mm-hmm.
If they had just asked Gandalf, he would have been like, no, it's not even there.
Never been there. Never even made it to the guy that you thought might have had taken it there. But, it's cool.
That was actually sad in the Hobbit films whenever they showed that, that Thrain was captured in Dol Guldur and he's like all twisted and crazy, and running around like a psychopath in Dol Guldur because he's been tortured for the last however many years. Did you guys think that the messenger was one of the Nazgul, or maybe the mouth of Sauron, or was it just like a random messenger? They didn't really ever say, so I guess there's room to speculate. But they did say that he hissed.
Yeah, I didn't think that it was one of the Nazgul, just because you send one of those, because they don't have the same ability to change like Sauron did and appear in a different form. So, if like some slinky dude, people like rings. I'm like, no, no, thank you. I don't know what it is you're selling, but maybe try down in Dale. Yeah, definitely. The Bardings, they'd love you down there.
Yeah.
Now, did he make them new rings or return to them the ones that were lost?
I think he would try to build them new ones because he's already taken back all 7 of the Dwarven rings. Yeah. So I guess, I think at this point, Sauron is drawing power from those rings at this point. It's part of what's helping to keep him sustained is what he's getting from the 9 and the 7. I like when Dane is like, yeah, my time is my own. I'll get back to you when I feel like it.
Yeah.
It's a very kingly thing to say.
Yeah, I think they did a great job casting him in 5 Armies when he comes riding in on his hog with his massive hammer and his big horn helmet, and just has no regard for Thranduil at all, does not care. And yeah, that is one cool thing about the dwarves is they are not going to be dominated by anybody. They're not going to allow anybody, it doesn't matter how powerful they are, they're not going to swear allegiance to Sauron.
Right.
Elrond tells about the history of Celebrimbor and the making of the rings. The dwarves in Moria had shut their gate when all the bad stuff was going down. And then he talks about the elves were betrayed by Sauron, who was going by the name Anatar at that time, who taught them how to smith the rings. So like Celebrimbor was like a pupil of Sauron's, who again learned crafting. That was his main job whenever he was in Valinor.
I don't know how you're supposed to take anybody with a name like Celebrimbor seriously, but it's like
And Celebrimbor is a cool character. All right, play Shadow of Mordor.
I didn't say he wasn't cool. I'm sorry you're like buds or something like that. I'm just saying the name's funny.
Let's see. There's just a lot of like lore stuff. Anything, if you guys think of something, just shout it out. But
I'm actually having a little bit of trouble when it comes to all that. It's kind of like reading Tom Clancy and reading out tech specs for an F-14 Tomcat. After a while, the lore just kind of gets to be like, I get it. All these people with unpronounceable names did awesome crap hundreds of years ago. Perfect.
I liked that that and this version of it versus the film at the council. Faramir was the one who had the dream instead of Boromir.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, do you guys like still notice like Aragorn is so freaking different from he is so much more confident in this whole section. Every section of the book so far, like he does not have any qualms at all about being the heir of Numenor.
Yeah.
Like there's no like, emo, whiny, Viggo Mortensen, trying to like, oh no, the same blood, the same weakness flows in my veins. He like I like that he just pulled
Viggo, man.
I like Viggo. Viggo's great. He was a great cast for that character. But it just I feel like Peter Jackson, like they have a problem with a couple different characters, like in changing their tone a lot. So like Merry and Pippin, obviously they like make them comedic relief throughout the films and just make them complete idiots and don't give them much nuance. So that, obviously that's not true of the characters in the books. Aragorn, I've noticed this time through is really different. And then, Gandalf, I feel like they changed his character quite a bit towards the end.
I think it's kind of generally speaking, a rule in screenwriting, especially when you're taking things from a book, is the characters, you have to focus on one facet of their personality, because you can't really, especially with a large cast, have a great deal of those kind of facets going on, or it just starts getting too confusing. So it's just like, for Gandalf the wizard, what do you need to focus on? Well, you need to focus on the fact that he's powerful and kind of omniscient. And you can't really get into the fact that he might have a substance abuse problem and has a little bit of an attitude. That's a little bit too much to be able to do.
I like that we've turned Gandalf into Tommy Chong.
That's what I'm saying. You did it. I'm sorry. It was a very short trip, but you're the bus driver and you took him there. So you're going to
no.
So I think with Aragorn, it's the same thing. Because, really, in a way, it sort of dilutes the character a little bit, because then, like, when I start thinking about it, as if he's so flippin' sure of himself, then why hasn't he done something about this long before now? Why isn't he trying to claim the throne? Or why isn't, so if you tried to do that in the films, if he's just this brash guy, I think he'd come off really unlikable. He'd come off as egotistical. Because again, you can't go into all the backstory that you have to be able to flesh him out and make him likable. So I think it was kind of necessary, and I don't know if it's brilliant or the best course of action, but it served the movie.
I wish you had like a Lord of the Rings cinematic universe, and you had a solo Aragon, movie, in which they could develop that.
Dear God, I hope that does not happen.
That's they bring them.
I want to see the story of tweenager Aragorn. I want to see him going through puberty as a Numenorian. What does that mean? Is it like 30 years long? Does it take 10 years for your voice to change? Do you see Aragorn popping around the woods going, Father, how do I set this bear trap? For like a decade. These are answers that I must know.
When Bilbo recites the prophecy, of course, because Bilbo's got to get his 2 cents in there to let everybody know that he's still there.
Yeah.
And Aragorn says, I'm going to come to Minas Tirith. So he's already planning to go and take the throne.
Yeah.
And then he asks, Boromir, what do you think about that? And obviously Boromir had his moment of doubt. But also in the same way that Aragorn is different, Boromir is not nearly as hostile towards Aragorn as he is in the films. He's uneasy with it, but I think in general, the tone I get from Boromir, and you guys may have seen it differently, is like, we'll take whatever help we can get at this point. We just need help.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you've got the weapon or whatever. We're just going to keep on fighting, and we're going to do so with honor. And if you guys want to come along and help, that'd be great. But this is happening.
Yeah. He definitely comes off as more like skeptical than the rest of the characters. I don't know. Well, yeah, I mean, it's just like, on the one hand, it's like he has this very like detailed dream, and he just so happens to get there, like, again, because I think it was fairly similar to Legolas as well. They just happened to show up like the night before, so it's like the timing for them was like perfect. But yeah, I don't know. It's like I remember kind of later on in the chapter, like I think it was maybe around the time that he was like talking about trying to use the ring. Like, what are we talking about? Destroying it or sending it away?
Right.
Let's use it. And yeah, and I don't know. It's just like he just didn't really seem to have much well, I wouldn't say he didn't have respect, but I don't know. He definitely, I don't know, just like...
He doesn't realize the gravity of what they're dealing with.
Right. And yeah, and then it's just like, I don't know, he just like, because it's like, oh, they're wanting to get rid of this tool and stuff. I thought like Elrond, I thought you were like so great, and and I don't know, it just like seemed like the whole experience was like, I don't know, like, yeah, he didn't understand how dangerous it was, and I don't know, maybe like overestimated like their like ability or their wisdom or something. Like I don't know. I just like I got a vibe from him that it's just like, and again, it's like, well, maybe it's just because he's like a man, and where it's like most of them are like super old, and it's like, I don't know, it's like in fantasy, I'm sure a lot of it stems from the way that Tolkien wrote the characters, but like humans are like kind of like rash, and it's like for such a short like lifespan, it's like think that they know everything. And I don't know, I just felt like that came across somewhat strongly, and seeing Boromir more or less representing like humans in this like council, just very short-sighted. And
I appreciate that perspective. I'd never really thought about that, but yeah, I mean, when you consider, Boromir probably at this point is like probably in his 30s, maybe 40s.
You think he's that old?
I think so. I think he's in his 30s probably. He's not old, but he's not super young.
Sean Bean was, I think early 40s when he played him. So
Yeah, but again, I think that has to do more with the age of what people need to appear on screen.
Yeah.
That's not taking into fact that, people came of age at 13 or 14. I always because by the time you're 30, if you're thinking of the Middle Ages, you're darn near dead. So I don't know what the average lifespan of a human being is supposed to be in Middle Earth, but if you're thinking of it like medieval or before, that's already kind of an old person by that point. And by that point, you've been studying, and committing war. And that was kind of the thing that I was thinking of is, yes, he's very human, but I also thought of him as sort of like the prototypical military man. It's like, I don't need to know how nuclear fission works. I just need to know that when you drop one of those, you incinerate a lot of the enemy. You're not really thinking of the philosophical side of things. You're thinking of protecting your territory and your people, and whatever it takes to get the job done is what you're going to do.
Those are both really good perspectives on Boromir. Like I said, I'd never really thought about that. I mean, even Frodo is considerably older than him.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much everybody there at the council would be, probably a lot older and wiser than Boromir. So yeah, I think that's really great perspective. Oh, when Aragorn goes into that whole section where he finally just kind of like lets off some steam about the way that they're viewed as rangers, and like talks about, like we keep the lands, safe in the north, and yet there's a fat man in Bree who calls me Strider, who doesn't realize, that if I were to let off one day, there are evils that would freeze him alive. Like
Yeah.
I liked his little rant there where he finally was like, you know what, I freaking had it. Like, you guys are a bunch of unthankful jerks.
Yeah. When I think about my journey, this journey, it makes up such an infinitesimal part of the amount of times I've walked around this earth protecting people. And so don't blow me no smoke, Boromir, about the tough times you're having over there in Gondor.
Your giant world.
It's wild to think that Aragorn's in his 80s, at this point.
Yeah.
I liked that that Elrond made a point to say that Gandalf was in the place of highest honor in the group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking to Jordan about this yesterday, and we both thought this was kind of interesting. So, obviously there are a lot of different entities pulling strings in Middle Earth, whether for good or bad. And, Gandalf seems to kind of be the one as far as, good forces of good pulling the most strings in different places. He's known as the Wandering Wizard. He's all over the place, moving different chess pieces all the time.
Right.
But Jordan and I were talking about, again, him being a Maiar, being this angelic being or whatever, whenever he was chosen to be one of the 5 wizards, and this was in that same section in the Silmarillion, so I kind of happened upon it. Whenever he was picked to be in the group, he was originally picked as the 3rd wizard to go. He wasn't picked as as the second, because the way it was, in the film, he or in the books as of right now, you have Saruman, and then you have Gandalf, and then Radagast, and the 2 blue wizards that nobody cares about. But he was considered to be the wisest of all the Maiar in Valinor, but also considered to be the kindest. And his valor was Manwë, the king of all the Valar. But it said that he would like sneak off to go spend a lot of time with this other Valar who was like the god of compassion. And that's where he learned about, compassion and grace and the power of showing compassion and pity. And so whenever he was told, hey, you're going to have to go to Middle Earth, and fight Sauron, he actually tried to protest and not go. He tried to not be sent. And his quote was, I fear that I'm too weak. I'm not powerful enough to contend with Sauron. And so Manwë was like, well, okay, so not only are you going to go, but I'm going to upgrade you to number 2 now because you need to get over your fear, and then booted him out of Valinor.
Sink or swim, Gandalf.
Deuces.
Yeah.
Now, did the order in which they were picked affect anything?
It mattered because it was kind of an order of power, because when they get there, they're not in their Maiar form.
That's what I was going to ask, if they had like a limiter on their abilities based on. Okay.
Yeah, they're definitely not as powerful as they would have been in Valinor, and I think part of that is them. The Valar did not want the Istari solving all the problems of men and elves. That was not the purpose. It was to get there and equip men to be able to deal with it and take things forward. Because I think the Valar realized that, the age of magic was coming to an end, and men needed to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. So I think it's, interesting that, they chose, quote unquote, the, meek, humble, one who eventually ends up being the head of the order after, Saruman falls. So just a little lore background thing there.
So kind of going into that and kind of going back to something that Kevin said earlier, you've basically got Saruman the White, Gandalf the Gray, and Radagast the Gullible.
I guess.
You're not part of the book, and he was just like, well, I just told Radagast to go tell you there's a problem. Radagast is like, okay. And like Gandalf basically gets in front of Saruman. He's just like, there's something not right about this dude. But Radagast is apparently just oblivious.
And part of that too is like Radagast as a Maiar, he served under the Valar of like, it's like this creature type. It's like this super hippy dippy Valar. And so it kind of makes sense that he's this overly optimistic, overly trusting, positive guy, because that's pretty much kind of the Valar that he came from.
Because Gandalf even called him like the most honest.
Yeah. So he again, gullible, but very kind and honest and powerful too in his own way. Saruman is so freaking arrogant to like see himself as so far above the others, because he's really not.
He hates like Radagast gets mentioned in a certain way by Gandalf during their Orthanc encounter, and he just like laughs him off like a fool and an idiot, and like that he's nothing.
Yeah. And he's not. He's definitely not. Radagast is one of the most powerful entities in Middle-earth.
He's very much like a nature wizard kind of thing. Like,
and, the fact that you as a wizard can summon the eagles to kind of do what you need to do is a pretty big deal. Like, that's not a small thing.
And why are the eagles such lazy bitches? Like, every time they want to carry somebody somewhere, they're just like, well, I came to deliver a message. I'm not here to, like, Uber you around Middle-earth. I'm just like, do you guys not realize that there's some serious stuff going on? Do you not? I know you're an eagle, and then you're like this, and your brain's like that. But Gandalf was just entrapped on top of the tower, So there's obviously something bad going on, and you're just like, oh, well, why don't I just fly you to Rohan? You can get a horse and go yourself. That'll be fine, right? Because I got other bird things to do.
Yeah, the whole eagle issue is one brought up by, because they're kind of a big monkey wrench in the entire story if you really think about it. They
Just
could
these
have.
big
fly
feather
on.
douches that show up in the scripts every once in a while.
Yeah, they're used as kind of a scapegoat for bad problems that can't be solved in any other way. And then also in times where it would make sense to use them, like, I don't know, flying over Mount Doom and dropping the ring into it.
Yeah.
Now, the argument for that is, the fell beast, would fight them, yada, yada, yada. But I'm like, well, there's like 9 of the fell beasts.
Yeah.
This particular
Like
case.
at this point in time, if they were to leave right now, who's telling like how prepared Mordor even was for something like that? Like they're saying the writing just got washed away. They have not had time to go get a new mount.
Yeah.
Or I'm even just talking about this specific case.
Oh yeah.
Gandalf needs to go somewhere, and he's one of the most powerful beings in Middle Earth, and they apparently know him pretty well. And they're just like, no, I got other things to do.
You're
I don't know. And, it's kind of the same thing, like, jumping into another universe, whenever in Endgame, where Captain Marvel obviously could have solved 2/3 of their problems, but she's like, oh, I got other shit to do. Bye.
Right her out of the story,
Yeah. So they had that, I don't know. It is what it is. Gandalf talks about going into Dol Guldur, and I actually thought the Hobbit films did a great job on that, where he kind of has that little, battle with Sauron in Dol Guldur and gets captured. That section of the movie is really good, and I thought, that one's in Desolation of Smaug at the end of the film. Recommend watching that. It's really good. It's on my Voodoo. The extended edition is, if you guys want to watch it. But, Saruman was the one who kept them from attacking earlier. So it kind of makes you wonder, like, if they would have been able to attack before Sauron had time to build things up in Mordor, if they could have dealt with things a lot quicker.
He made a comment that Sauron let them drive him off from Dol Guldur. So what would attacking even have accomplished if he let them, because he already had stuff ready even at that point?
I don't know, like, timeline-wise, though, if he had things ready in Mordor. I think because I think the wizards showed up in Middle-earth like 200 years before the events of The Hobbit. So, I mean, they weren't there all that long, and they were sent there with that purpose.
Right.
So, I don't know how that all plays out. But, yeah, the whole section at Orthanc was really well written. That was tremendous. I love that whole section. And Saruman is so arrogant. Oh my God, like, he's hard to deal with. Like,
and all I can see is Christopher Lee in my head reading that part. Like, he's perfect if he would have done that full scene.
Yes.
Like, if they hadn't done the fight and just done like the word matching back and forth, him and Ian.
Yeah.
There was a statement that Gandalf makes, and there he says, in all the wars of the Dark Tower, treason has ever been the greatest foe.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that seems significant. Out of all the enemies they've had, it's really just people turning.
Right.
Has been the biggest issue. People that we trusted ended up, going over.
Yeah.
And they said, they even made a comment that this is hardly the first time something like this has happened over the ages.
Right.
I wonder if that would be hard. Like, if you had lived that long, you've lived like Glorfindel. I mean, Glorfindel's been around since the First Age, and so has Elrond. If you've lived that long and you've seen, I wonder if at a certain point, like, it becomes really hard to trust anything, because you've seen so much. And like, Elrond kind of almost alludes to that. He's like, we've seen, tons of victories and defeats, and it just seems like the world just keeps going in the direction we don't want it to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you almost just feel like your life was kind of futile after a while,
that's where Gandalf kind of throws that line in again about not losing hope, for that makes you like, well, I forget how he puts it. Like that's the one true defeat or something like that is how he was put.
But I think that's anytime you see in science fiction a omniscient being or an immortal being, any of them that have been around very long, there's this malaise that sets in. You know, you've been there, you've done that, you've seen it all. Life holds no more purpose and no more surprises for you anymore. So that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
Unless you're Bombadil, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I thought it was cool that he talks about how Denethor didn't greet him very well whenever he came to Gondor to try to study the ring. You know, he'd been way nicer. And, you know, Saruman has this, like, speechcraft, and we'll read a lot more about that in the Two Towers. But he has this ability, like, there's magic in his speech to persuade people. It's, like, part of Saruman's gift. And so, you know, when he goes to treat with leaders, they really kind of just melt all over him because he's so, you know, he's in a white robe and he's well-groomed and, you know, looks like somebody who's very important, whereas Gandalf is, you know, kind of described as kind of like a homely-looking old man.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, it talked about how Aragorn actually did catch Gollum, you know, for a segment, and that Gollum bit him.
Yeah.
That was funny too.
The only thing I got out of him were teeth marks.
Yeah. Which really goes to tell like how resilient Gollum is, because yeah, I mean, I can't imagine being interrogated by Aragorn would be a pleasant thing.
Well, and the funny thing to me is kind of like when we were talking about Bilbo's age. I know he didn't have the ring nearly as long as Gollum, but they talk about how it grants extended life. At this point, Gollum has not been in possession of the ring for decades. You know, like almost 100 years, probably.
Yeah, like
70, 80 years,
yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
And he hasn't died.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering is it just his mania for the ring that's sustaining him, or does it take a long time for the power of the ring to wear off, or what? Because
I don't know, because it does with Frodo. Bilbo goes pretty quick
in the movie.
Yeah.
But again, we were saying in the book, it doesn't really, it says that it doesn't really say that he's old or decrepit or anything like that. It just says that he's kind of being hosted by the elves. If he went downhill that quickly, I don't think he could have gotten back from Dale.
Yeah, that's true. I went back and I actually watched the extended edition of the council scene from the Fellowship film. And I guess in the film, when the black speech starts, there's two different versions of the film. In the original, Gimli tries to smash the ring with his axe,
right?
And, and then you have the Naj, you know, and the black speech starts, and then Gandalf stands up and starts speaking it, but it's almost like he's warding off whatever is speaking. And then in the extended one, it's Boromir reaching for the ring. And then all of a sudden the black speech starts happening. But I realized, watching it again, I was like, oh no, they did keep true to the book. It is actually Gandalf who starts it. It's not an outside thing. It is Gandalf standing up and reciting the lines of the ring, basically just to scare the shit out of Boromir.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'd never caught that before, but that darkening, all of that was Gandalf. Basically shaking the room, saying like, you guys need to get your shit together. This is actually a pretty scary thing.
This is the ring. Like, don't doubt it.
Yeah. And it's like for a moment there, he like almost like channeled like some dark powers there to give them a glimpse of that. And even the elves covered their ears and were freaked out by it, So anyway, I guess I had always thought that the films made it seem like Sauron was chanting there, and then Gandalf was standing up and reciting it to kind of ward him off. I didn't realize that it was just Gandalf reciting all of it.
Just Gandalf making a point.
Yeah.
As much as they push him in the book, like, that's not really the ring. And he's like, seriously, I just laid out my whole story and research I did.
And then they're talking with Legolas is talking about how they treated Gollum so kindly and they let him go on walks, and Gollum's like, yeah, you were a lot less tender to me.
Yeah.
And Gandalf's like, don't interrupt, Gollum. If we were to recite all of the issues between dwarves and dwarves, we might as well just end the council right now. That whole Orthanc section, like when he rides into Orthanc and he says, the gate closed behind me and I was suddenly afraid, but I knew not why. I thought, man, that was really well done. He goes up, he sees Sauron, he notes he has a ring on. He makes a point to say that. So Saruman's made his own ring. And so, like, people argue back and forth on whether or not Saruman made the ring or if the ring was a gift from Sauron. It kind of goes back and forth on that. We already talked about how messed up the way that he talks about Radagast. What did you guys think about his robes when he talks about them, like, kind of like turning to rainbow?
Yeah, the multicolored robes.
He shed the white, yeah.
Yeah.
Gandalf has a quote. It says, "He who breaks a thing to find out what's in it has left the path of wisdom."
I thought that was a good line too.
Yeah. And of course, Saruman's all pissed and she's like, "Do not lecture me like one of your stupid friends."
Well, and I know that the Seeing Stones come in at some point, right?
They do, but not in the books as much. They will later on.
But I thought, yeah, that's what I thought, because there's that point where Wormtongue throws it at them from up in the tower, and he's just like, what are you doing throwing my Seeing Stone?
Yeah, that will happen.
Yeah.
Um,
and that was something I remembered from the book, but didn't come up like it does in the movie at this point.
When Saruman, says, I'm giving you the chance to aid me willingly. And Gandalf says, so basically you're giving me the choice between following you or serving Sauron. I choose neither. Do you have any other offers?
Yeah.
And then there was that whole little section where he says, I actually want to read this quote because it was really good. Saruman, I said, standing away from him, only one-handed at a time can wield the one. And you know that well, so do not trouble to say we. But I would not give it, nay, I would not even give news of it to you, now that I learn your mind. You were head of the council, but now you have unmasked yourself at last. Well, the choices are, it seems, to submit to Sauron or to yourself. I will take neither. Have you others to offer? Now he was cold and perilous. Yes, he said, I did not expect you to show wisdom, even on your own behalf. But I gave you the chance of aiding me willingly and saving yourself much trouble and pain. The third choice is to stay here until the end. Until what end? Well, until you reveal to me where the one may be found, I may find means to persuade you, or until it is found in your despite, and the ruler has time to turn to lighter matters, to devise, say, a fitting reward for the hindrance and insolence of Gandalf the Grey.
Yeah.
Then Gandalf says, that may not prove to be one of the lighter matters. I thought that was a great quote.
Yeah.
even though he already knows, he says he laughed at me for my words were empty and he knew it. But just Gandalf's kind of like, proverbial middle finger being thrown up in the air at those guys. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of another question is, considering their station and what kind of beings that they are, do they even really care about their mortality?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, if you're threatening somebody that's from a choir of angels that you already know that you're going to exist in some form, even if this mortal shell die, how can you threaten somebody like that?
I don't know. I mean, they still feel physical pain, and I think if they're going to, they can be tortured and hurt.
Yeah. But again, as a immortal being, you would know that that physical pain was transitory.
Well, but it can be prolonged for a very long period of time, which would still be miserable.
But he's been around for centuries. So yeah, it might be miserable, but I mean, if he's as committed to his, I mean, I guess once Saruman realizes that he's committed to the purpose that he was sent down to Middle Earth to fulfill, then yeah, you don't want to set him free, but making those kinds of
threats,
yeah, don't really seem to hold a lot of, other than from our standpoint, because it makes sense to us. But once you read into it.
Well, and Gandalf the Grey had no chance of standing up to Saruman or Sauron. He really didn't. I mean, and that's why there's not a big fight like there is in the films. Gandalf just like goes, okay, my options are here to try to fight Saruman and get owned, or just let him take me hostage, which is what he did. He just like, okay, because he knew it wasn't a fight that he was going to be able to win.
Yeah, he brought a knife to a gunfight, and there wasn't anything to be done about that.
And I like that he goes on the whole rant about like, man, like it's very rare for me to get caught in like a fly in a spider's web. That's not a normal thing for Gandalf to have happen.
Yeah.
When he says, hang on. Okay, yeah. I hoped that Frodo had set forth at once, as my letter had urged, and that he had reached Rivendell before the deadly pursuit began. And both my fear and my hope proved ill-founded. For my hope was founded on a fat man in Bree, and my fear was founded on the cunning of Sauron.
Yeah.
Men who sell ale have many calls to answer, and the power of Sauron is still less than fear makes it. But he's like, yeah, my hope was in a fat man in Bree.
Poor Butterbur. Well, and I think when he said that when he's telling the TikTok of him trying to catch up with Frodo, doesn't he say like, I fully intended to go melt that fat Butterbur or something like that?
They call him Butterbur, but I was going to melt him like butter. And indeed, he melted like butter when he saw me.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing that I thought about that was, even though all the Nazgul were out after them and they were behind the 8 ball and he was still playing catch up, when he finds out that he's with Strider, he's just like, oh, well, cool. So I can just chill here tonight.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it probably would have been good to rest and all, but, taking the evening and sleeping in a bit might not have been the best way to go.
Oh, he's been through a lot.
Yeah.
Now, they talked about how not Gundor, but Rohan was sending horses as tribute to Mordor.
Yeah.
And Boromir got really pissed and was like, no, that's not true. but they never actually specified if it's true or not.
Yeah.
So we don't really know if that's really happening or not. It's cool that he got Shadowfax like all the way back then, not just in Two Towers.
I thought it was kind of funny, though, that the Nazgul are actually riding regular horses. I thought that was kind of strange.
Yeah, they're horses bred in Mordor.
Yeah, but they're still just horses.
Yeah.
So, and I would think that since there's nothing really that special about them, they're riding off to the corners of Middle-earth. So what happens if their horse dies or breaks a leg? Every other animal in the world runs from them. So they just gotta, walk back to Mordor to get another horse.
I would think that they could send some sort of signal to have somebody bring them.
But still, somebody would then still have to ride a horse to them wherever they're at. So it just seems like a bad plan to me.
Yeah, I guess.
It's like if I was driving around in a car that only ran on canola oil. It's like, okay, well, yeah, it'll get me from A to B, but if I can't find some canola oil, I guess I'm screwed.
He talks about how, Shadowfax may have been there at the founding of the world.
Oh.
Shadowfax may be like, he's I forget there's like an actual name, but they're like magical horses. Like they're not like normal horses.
He's a hornless unicorn?
Basically, yeah, but he runs, his coat during the day is brilliant white, but it's like he's like covered in shadow at night and you can't hear his gallop, and he's twice as fast. I mean, he's crazy.
Yeah.
Shadowfax is pretty cool. When he's talking to Butterbird, he says, "Ass, fool, thrice worthy, and beloved."
Yeah. So you don't think that I always thought that Shadowfax I thought he was described as like the king of horses or something like that.
He's the lord of all horses.
He's what?
The lord of all horses.
Yeah, but I guess it's kind of like the eagles are thinking intelligent beings, but horses to a certain degree still seem to just be stupid horses in Middle-earth.
Not in Middle-earth. They're not.
Okay.
So it says Shadowfax resided in Rohan.
Yeah.
But it just says out of luck, it seems like, that Shadowfax happens to be of the line of the Valar horse.
Huh.
So, I mean, he's like a magical being.
Yeah.
Not normal.
Also, he doesn't get fear from the Witch King like the other horses do.
But he was being held and stabled by the Rohirrim.
Yes.
Okay.
But they're horse lords, and I think he just felt comfortable with them because they have such high regard for horses. So I think that would be a natural place for him to want to hang out, because these guys treat me like a freaking king.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey.
But he in Middle-earth, the horses do have some level of autonomy. They have thoughts, like even the elves can like kind of speak to the horses and kind of tell them what, and there's a deeper connection there. It's almost kind of like in the Narnia series, how the horses could talk.
Right.
It's kind of similar to that, I'd say, in some regard. Yeah, I think you saw a little bit of that in the films as well, like when Aragorn gets Brago, that horse, and says, "Oh, it's a kingly name," and starts, speaking in Elvish to him to calm him down. And then when Aragorn falls, Brago comes and finds him, and basically gets him back to Helm's Deep. And then right after all this, they go into the whole Bombadil thing on whether or not Bombadil would be, a good person to give the ring to. What do you guys think about that?
Well, it was funny. I think it was Elrond, was like, "Oh, that dude's still alive? Like, I knew him by a different name, but I guess he's still out there.
I like when he's like, well, maybe I should have invited him. And Gandalf's like, well, he wouldn't have come. Like,
Yeah.
And like what we talked about earlier in the book when we were at that point, they kind of confirmed it there in the council that he has set up like his domain. He's got borders of his own, and he won't mess with that while he can be safe there.
yeah. And it still doesn't really give you any more insight into what or who he is.
Because they even say, like, even if the world was the fault of Sauron, that in their opinion, he would actually be the last to fall, most likely.
Well, yeah, he definitely would be.
So, like, even it's kind of weird seeing, like, Elrond and, like, say that kind of gloomy kind of thing. Like, oh, yeah, we'd all be gone before he would be. And, like, we'd lose.
I like how they're just like, yeah, well, he'd probably end up just throwing the ring away or losing it because he just
Doesn't care about that sort of thing.
And it's funny because right when we got to that section of the book, I started thinking again, why don't they just throw it in the ocean? And then Glorfindel starts talking about that, right there. They don't want to do that because they're creatures and over time it could reappear and they're afraid of that.
Yeah, I think Elrond even says very specifically, as long as this exists, there's a danger.
Yeah. And then, of course, Bilbo offers to take the ring.
Yeah.
Which was super cute. And he's dead serious about it.
So I can just see the actor, like, hopping up, pounding his chest, and like, I'll take it. It's like, I see what you want. It's great. I'll go. No worries. I just popped an acid. I'm ready to go.
I'm ready.
Poor old Bilbo.
Yeah.
It's like he feels bad. Like, he's like, I wish I had known what this was a long time ago. I could have done something about it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, he could have made that journey himself a long time before then. Also, the famous Sean Bean, one does not simply didn't happen. And it was actually Aristor who says, it's folly to march into Mordor.
Yeah.
But anything else in the chapter that really stuck out to you?
I think we've covered most of it.
There's a lot. That chapter's like, it's almost all lore and no action. So it's like.
And honestly, I almost would have been okay with that full segment being in the movie.
Yeah.
And like us getting the Orthanc scene, we would see it at that point when he mentions, this is where I was, this is where Gollum was. Maybe not exactly, give us a separate scene of that, just them telling and letting the audience mind, like, ooh, who are these characters? Where is this at? Let us kind of picture it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.